Well, hey everybody, and welcome to this midweek review with Mr. John. I am Mr. John, and we are in the Christmas season, and we have been talking about prophecy. The people in the Old Testament, the prophets who forecasted, I guess. It'd be kind of like a weatherman. Think about it. The weatherman kind of sits there and he gets all these signs and he kind of tries to put the pieces of the puzzle together and predict the weather for us. Well, with a weatherman and a prophet, there is a huge difference. A weatherman can be wrong. A prophet is not. Here's why a prophet is not: because he's getting the information directly from God. And God is telling the prophet, this thing is going to happen in the future. You need to tell people. And so the prophet tells everybody. And we talked about how the prophets talked about a coming Savior. They talked about this baby that was to come. But did you know that the prophets and the angels also proclaimed another baby to come ahead of the baby that we know as the Savior of the world, Jesus? And this baby was to be the messenger for Jesus. And let me explain in the story, and we'll talk about the messenger, okay? But this started with an older couple, Zechariah and Elizabeth. Now, they were older, and Zechariah worked in the temple. He had many jobs in the temple. He would read prayers, he would light incense, he would make sure that sacrifices were done correctly and the right sacrifice was given for the right penance or the right sin. And so he had a lot of various jobs in the temple. And his wife Elizabeth, she kind of was the homemaker, right? That's just kind of how it was back then. And they, like I said, they were up in age, and they were probably well past what we would call the age where they would have children. Okay, just putting it nicely. So they had kind of reserved themselves to not having a baby. Well, one day, Zechariah is lighting some incense in the temple when the angel Gabriel comes to him and says, "Do not be afraid. I am here to tell you that you, my friend, and your wife are going to have a baby, and you will name him John." And so Zechariah, being up in age and probably, I would say, fairly wise for working in the temple, knew that him and his wife were a little bit past the age of having kids, and so he kind of has doubts. And I'm sure he was like to the angel Gabriel, "Yeah, right." We all get there, right? When we don't kind of buy into what somebody says, even if it's the truth, it's, "Yeah, right." Well, Zechariah gives the angel a "yeah, right." And the angel is not pleased with this. "Listen, this is direct word from God. And because you didn't believe, I am going to take your voice away from you. You will not be able to speak until the day that this comes true." And so immediately Zechariah he can't speak. Well, the angel goes to Elizabeth and tells her the same thing. Tells her that she is going to have a baby. And now Elizabeth's reaction, I imagine, was a little bit different than Zechariah's. The "yeah, right." Elizabeth was over the moon. She was so pleased, so happy. And this is because in those days, it was really frowned upon that a woman did not have a baby. And we've talked about this many times. It was one of those things that this was kind of how the woman was judged. They were sit there, and if they couldn't have babies, they were seen as less than a woman. And if a woman could have a baby, it was carrying on the legacy, especially a boy baby, it was carrying on the legacy of their family, keeping their family name going. And so Zechariah ends up having to go on a job, and it's not like he could sit there and go, no, I can't go. Remember, he can't speak. So he goes out on the job, and while he's away, there's a young girl in a town called Nazareth who is in a very similar situation. She finds out that she is pregnant, and she hears that her aunt Elizabeth is pregnant, and she just feels she has to go and visit. So she goes to visit this Elizabeth. And this girl who is pregnant, we will know her and we will talk about her next week. This was Mary, the mother of Jesus. So Elizabeth, very pregnant, and Mary, not so pregnant, kind of just maybe starting to meet each other. And when they meet each other, Mary comes up and she gives Elizabeth a greeting. And when Elizabeth gets near Mary, something incredible happens. The baby inside of Elizabeth's stomach, in her tummy, starts to do jumps for joy. Just almost like praising and worship. Yes, yes, I am near the Savior. Now, remember, the baby, Jesus, is in the tummy of Mary, and the baby, John, is in the tummy of Elizabeth. They can't see each other. I don't know if they can hear each other. I don't know how all that works, but they knew. John knew he was in the presence. Unborn baby John is in the tummy, hearing and knowing that this is the Savior of the world coming for us. So Mary can't stick around, right? She's got to go back. She's going to have the Savior of the world, right? She's going to have this baby. And so she goes back. Elizabeth sticks around, and eventually Zechariah comes home to a very pregnant Elizabeth, and she is so thankful. She just tells Zechariah how happy she is and how God has blessed her and taken her just this anxiety and this pain and this suffering away from her for letting her be able to have a baby. And so Zechariah, I'm sure, was like, remember, he can't speak, so he was jumping for joy, but nothing coming out, right? So anyway, Elizabeth ends up having the baby. Okay? And women, they would have the midwives and everybody in there of women would be in there with Elizabeth giving birth to the baby. And they ask Elizabeth what they should name the baby. And, in those days, it was proper to name the baby after the father. So it should have been little Zechariah, right? But no, Mary says, we're going to name this baby John. So meanwhile, in another room, the men, they didn't kind of go in with the women, the good old days. They're in there, they're all sitting around, and I'm sure they hear the cry of the baby, however they did it back then, but the baby cry, and they knew the baby was born. And they begin to talk. Hey, Zechariah, congratulations, my man. What are you going to name the baby? You going to name it after yourself? It's custom and everything. And Zechariah, he kind of does this. He wants something to write on. And so he gets a tablet, and he just writes on the tablet. Now, remember, he was told his name is John. And in that moment, guess what came back? His voice. Just like the angel Gabriel had said, once that this has happened, you will get your voice back. And boom, he got his voice back. Now, we have come to know this baby to be later on to be John the Baptist. And when I said that he was the messenger for Jesus, now in Malachi 3:1, it says that a messenger will come, and that is who that prophecy in the Old Testament is talking about. John the Baptist. So our Christmas story is perfect, right? It actually talks about two babies in it, really. It talks about John the Baptist, who at the age of 30 for Jesus, John the Baptist will baptize Jesus, introducing him to the world. And for 3 years, Jesus will just set the world ablaze with the Father from heaven. So guys, Christmas is coming. I hope you're getting excited. Next week, we're going to talk about that young lady who went on that trip to see Elizabeth. And we're going to talk about Mary. So have a great week. Hey, verse is coming up next. This is a great verse. It's about the light of the world. Talk to you later. Bye. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. John 1:9.